Thank you. This is the April 13th, 2021 policy meeting for Scarborough Schools. On today's agenda, we have the review of the 2021-2022 calendar. So we left it last time with a few proposals of things that we thought might be interesting to review and discuss. Can you pick up where that left off, Diane?
Yeah, we actually have several of our principals are on the meeting today, so if I could promote them, that would be great.
Okay, thank you.
Can you take notes, Alisha?
It's rude to assume things, isn't it, Leanne?
Well, I figured I should probably open it just in case.
You're so nice to me. Thank you.
All right. Looks like everyone who is in the audience is now a panelist.
Oh, wait a minute. Where is the agenda?
Let me, I just had it up here. See if I can.
No, that's October. Oh, 413. There we go. Found it.
Okay.
Found it.
Thank you. All right, so do you want to lead us in, Diane, or do you want the principals to start? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll just kind of kick it off. You know, I think after our last meeting, we went back and we shared the ideas that the policy committee had, and we brought those back to the principals. And so the principals have had some time to kind of take all of that in and thought that it might be helpful if today they could have more full conversation with you about those 4 proposals that you had. And I think that they might also have another one for consideration. So I am going to push this off to Jess Steele. And Jess, are you able to share your screen?
I can, but I'm wondering if someone else would do it now. I think we all need to be able to see some notes.
Okay.
I could screen share after.
Let me just.
I don't think we have permission to screen share right at the moment.
All right, let me see if I can.
I was trying to
find
see
what you're looking for. Just not open online. Okay.
Could you promote Kelly Mullen Martin? She's joined us.
1 minute. Okay.
All right, is Kelly with us?
She is.
Okay, cool. All right, so we wanted to thank you, first of all, for having this conversation with us, and let you know that the proposal that we put forward prior, and then the ones that you put toward, you asked us to consider, is very specific to the return of in-person learning for this fall. And really premised off of this experience that we've had with hybrid and fully remote learning during a pandemic. So we just really appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation with you, and we know that you are just as committed as we are to that supportive and student-centered transition this fall. So thank you guys so much for letting us come to you today to talk through this. So our original plan was proposed with our best thinking, but also it was our lived experiences with our students and staff throughout this pandemic. So we have emphasized in multiple prior conversations that we feel like it would be a real failure of our leadership to just do what we've always done. And that this pandemic has been incredibly hard, but it's given us a lot of opportunities to stretch ourselves, and we have learned so much about how we can best meet student needs. One of the key takeaways from last fall's transition that K2 was allowed to do something very different is that taking that time to build relationships with our students absolutely matters. So we're going to go over all the rationale for our original proposal in just a few minutes, but I just wanted to start us off with making sure that we're all on the same page, because this is a national conversation about the fall. This isn't just us trying to figure out, what do we want to do. We're really looking at what researchers and experts are saying all across the country. So the next slide is just a handful of quotes in relation specifically to reopening schools this fall that we wanted to share with you. Kelly Mullins shared a really powerful article today from EdWeek, which is a publication that we all get. Sometimes they send us things, daily or multiple times a day. But we just wanted to take a look at some of these quotes because we're in this day in and day out. And we want to assure you that there is no conversation around maximizing seat time right now, just right out of the gate this fall. But there is a lot of conversation around taking the time and this opportunity to address social and emotional needs of students as they transition. So, and there's just absolutely no memory of what school used to be like, especially for our K-5 students. And we have got to put ourselves in those 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 8, 9, 10-year-old shoes as we make a plan. Our conversation that we want to have with you today is really and truly our best effort to advocate for the children in this community.
Thank you, Jess. I couldn't agree more with what Jess has already said, and I think the word that resonates with me is titrate, I guess, from Dr. Fanberg, and sort of that titrating into school from a medical perspective and also from a social emotional perspective. I think that we all want to get back to normal, but there's a way to do that. And I think we've put a lot of thought into how to do that for our students. And we've based that on what we experienced last year and what we've all been doing this year and what we know to be sort of the best practice based on what we know. And that's what we put into this plan, which I know you're all very familiar with because you took a look at it and you gave us your best thinking about the scenarios and the counter proposals that you gave us back. So, this is just what we put forward to review, just sort of the 2 days leading off for all grades, appointment only, followed by half days for smaller groups, divided up by alphabet, with screening appointments in the afternoon. And we want to include all those social emotional activities to connect with students, because that, if you look at those quotes that Jess put up from that article, which is awesome, that's what it's all about, is really making kids feel connected and safe, and as comfortable coming back into school, some for the first time in a year, that they possibly can. And then welcoming all students back. Again, that titration idea. Yes, we want kids are going to be all together in those large groups for the first time. Again, some for the first time in a year. And having it be a half day and then be able to complete that screening time in the afternoon. And then those full days to begin on 9/13.
So we want to include a little bit of additional information about our K-5 proposal, our original proposal that you've already seen and that Kelly just reviewed for you. So we remain in agreement that this proposal really is just a strong start for our transition while our kiddos are, still experiencing a global pandemic. And the interesting part about this is, and this just doesn't happen really frequently, you guys, I'm sure, can appreciate, we felt we had really wholesale support from our staff too on our proposal. We felt really good coming forward. And so we recognize that you have a job to do in balancing community needs as well. But some additional information is that, 2/3 of our families by the fall of 2021 will still have never been inside our building. So 2/3 of the families at each phase have never set foot in our buildings. A little less for Sue because she's got 4 grade levels. Students haven't been in school or full-time in our buildings for the past 18 months, and no student at any phase, K-5, has experienced a full year in their phase level. And for K-2, they haven't experienced a full year of school in their career yet. So they really do deserve our careful and intentional attention to this transition. And so that's kind of the timeline of why they haven't experienced a full year. So we really feel like these screening appointments are so critically important and carefully planned out through this transition for a multitude of reasons. First and foremost is just making those one-to-one connections with students, ushering them back, understanding their lived experience through the pandemic, meeting new adults in their life, some transitioning phase level, some entering public school for the first time, meeting families, and just building relationships. And we feel our original proposal really meets those goals. But we understand that your perspective and Anne is going to share, our thinking around your counter proposals.
Yes, so you all very thoughtfully, thank you, everybody. And I couldn't agree more with what everybody has said so far. And we do want to just emphasize again that this is a one-time ask. This is not looking to recreate a new way to open school every year. We're looking at this through a lens of this is a global pandemic that none of us have ever navigated before. And this is our best intentional way to bring kids back as thoughtfully and as positively as possible. So you all came up with 5 other options, and all of them were very similar, but different amounts of in-person full whole group time and different amounts of small group time than we had originally asked for. And we completely understand the needs that parents and kids have to be back in school and to be back in school as fully as they can be. And I really want to just emphasize that we really believe starting slow will help us go fast later on so much better. So I don't need to read each of the additional comments underneath your options, but we really looked through each of the options that you proposed and talked about what the give to get was if we agreed to one of those options instead. And it's not to go off topic a little bit, but we had a very interesting experience here at 8 Corners last Friday. We had our cohort C, our remote only kids, coming into our special recess for the first time all school year. So it was the first time these kiddos were seeing each other in person, in the flesh, with a mask on, not on a screen, not from the privacy and security of their own home. And it was stunning to see how scared they were to be around other people, to be around unfamiliar people, how long it took them to sort of acclimate, to feel comfortable. Many of them really didn't even know what to do on the playground because they were so hesitant. I mean, it's going to take some time to be thoughtful, intentional, to bring kids back. Some who have been here all year, granted, for 2 days a week, but some who haven't. And so that's why we're trying to do some of that now. But I think we really have to look at the age appropriateness of our plans for these kiddos and not treat everybody in the school system, K-12, the same way. So long story short, you can see all the unmet needs that we have for options 1, 2, and 3. I don't need to read them into details. And then if you go to the next slide, I'm not sure who's controlling that, but if you go to the final slide, you will see that option 5 is by far the closest to the one that we had presented, and it's one that we can feel okay with, and that we feel like we can make that work, and that can give a little bit more in-person time for whole group, but also preserve that transition and that really intentional, thoughtful way to bring kids back into school. Again, this is just for this coming year. We don't anticipate needing this kind of time ever again, and needing to be this intentional and this careful. Hopefully, in the years to come, that we'll be back to being comfortable in large groups and feeling safe. But for right now, for kiddos who, on that very first slide of the slideshow, it shows the pie chart of a 5-year-old and the amount of time in their life that they've spent in a pandemic versus an 18-year-old, and it's pretty startling. So, we vetted through all of your recommendations, and, feel like option 5 would be, in our opinion, the best out of the 5 if you can't go with our plan that we feel strongly about. And we're happy to take questions, to talk about this, and to see what your thinking is.
Sorry, I have a new computer that I have a hard time maneuvering. Hi, April. I see April just joined us. Thanks for rushing to get in here. That was amazing. You got here that fast. I'm wondering if we could just sort of scroll back on the slides to bring April up to speed before we start that discussion, just because there's only 3 of us.
Sorry, guys. I would never ever be late unless it was absolutely important, and I just couldn't get out of that doctor's appointment fast enough.
So, Alisha, I don't know how far back do you want to go to this slide? Is there a particular slide you're looking for?
Oh, I don't care. I just wanted her to see what we saw.
If you want to just scroll through, Diane, that would be great. Okay.
That's just the recap of what we had originally proposed, April.
Yep. Awesome. Thank you, Kelly. Okay. 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 Okay, that catches me up, right? Okay, so I think probably goes without saying that our our K-5 leadership has been advocating pretty strongly in favor of the original proposal.
And just maybe the part that you missed is that the highlighted one, option 5, is the one that we feel like is closest to what we originally advocated for, if you truly feel that you can't support our original plan.
And April, just to also reiterate, this is a one-time ask. We're not looking to change the way we do school forever. This is only because, you know, a 5-year-old has spent now over 20% of their life in the pandemic. They don't know what going to school without a mask is like anymore. They don't, you know, they probably don't remember being 3 and going to preschool. So, you know, when you bring kids in next fall, they've spent 18 months of their 5 years of life in a global pandemic. And we just want to be really intentional and thoughtful and careful and go slow to go fast.
I certainly can't speak for anybody but myself. And I think that having the youngest kids of my own, you know, and having done this the most recently, I think I may be in the minority of the committee, and that's okay. But I just really, I feel like the strong advocacy for these days, I know it's not going to be popular. I know. And we are going to get pushback from parents who really just want these kids back in school as much as possible. Monique. Sorry.
I don't know if this is
not my meeting. Sorry.
Oh, I don't know if this is helpful to you or not, but there is the notion out there amongst parents, all parents, that if we just get them back into the building, everything will be okay. And while we as educators want to believe that as well, it's not going to be. This pandemic has changed our children, it's changed our families, and it's changed our educators. And next year, we are still going to be in a global pandemic. Yes, it will look different. We will be transitioning. But we need to make sure that our educators, who are also experiencing all the things that families and students are experiencing, are going to be able to do this in a quality way. And that's why the increase on SEL, and that's why we feel that this transition back is in the best interest of students. And a little later on, when you start talking about the Wednesday time, we want to make sure that our educators are well prepared to be able to support our students in transitioning, whether that means learning how to do school all over again, because it's going to be another whole new set of social norms for our kiddos. We also need to track the unfinished learning that's happening, and we also need to attend to their social emotional efforts. So while as educators, we want to think we know what kids are going to look like when they come back in the fall, that's unrealistic, and we need to prepare our educators to best support our students and families. So I don't know if that's helpful to you or not, but I totally understand. And one of the things I'm trying to do in working with staff is we're not going back anywhere. We're not going back to 2 years ago. Those days are gone, they're in the past. This is our new normal, and what are we going to do moving forward? And how do we best prepare our staff in order to receive and move our students forward as best we can with the time we have. So I think it is wonderful wishful thinking that the same kids who walked in the door in September are going to be the same kids who walk in the door this September, the ones that walked in pre-COVID. I just don't think that's going to be the case. And I think that we are making recommendations in order to best serve our students. And that is going to have calendar impact. And I get the imposition on the community, but I just wonder about that. It's just not going to be the same ever again.
I've heard both April and Monique say about the parents wanting the kids back to school and the imposition of the community. To me, that's not the inquiry. To me, the inquiry is what the benefit will be to the students for in-person instructional days versus preparatory time. And that's the inquiry that I'm going through. And I'm sure you're going through that as well, but to have a difference of opinion and to side on the in-person instruction, I don't think equates necessarily to succumbing to pressure from the community of wanting kids back just for that sake. For me, it's about the value of in-person instruction.
And if I could speak to that a little bit, there isn't prep time in this plan. There's individual student time versus small group or whole group student time. So I think that needs to be really clearly differentiated. There's not a teacher prep for school time embedded in this plan. And that's by design, because connecting individually with a student or a student's family has always been part of onboarding students or welcoming them back in some way. But to be even more strategic and careful about that, K through 5 or K through 12 is really important this coming year. So I just want to be clear that our teachers in the afternoon are not prepping, they are meeting with students and their families. So that is, I want that to be crystal clear.
Just to sort of back into a little of what Alicia's saying, I've mentioned this numerous times each time we've brought it up. I hear what you're saying about K-5. I have confidence in what middle school and high school are doing. But again, we can't pretend that our 6th through 12th graders are going to be just fine. They may not remember life pre-pandemic. I barely remember it. I think the fact that we're assuming that they can just walk in the door, turn on their computer and call it a day is shortchanging them and what they need as well. I know I've lost that battle a couple of times, but I'm not doing justice for those students if I don't advocate for them. I brought this up today in our finance meeting. We have ESSER money. Is it possible to bring in subs that we have substitute teachers who are working with the students? They're in the classroom. We're meeting in the middle. The kids are in the building. The parents are able to start bringing them back towards what's going to be happening day in, day out. And the staff are still going to have that opportunity to do that one-on-one time with a student. They can do their assessments while someone else is in with the rest of the kids. They may be able to spend more time. They might be able to get through maybe even more because they're not building in travel time for parents. And it's giving them the social time with their peers. Maybe they're not doing classwork. Maybe they're doing group work. Maybe they're learning how to be friends again. It's an option, and I know it's last minute, but we have money, and this is part of what it's supposed to be spent on, is making sure that we're addressing their social and emotional needs.
So Leanne, I love that idea. What was the response in the finance committee?
I'm not going to speak for you, Diane, so I'm going to put you on the spot.
No, I think when Leanne brought it up this morning, I thought that it was an interesting idea. Certainly, these are the kinds of things like we have to keep thinking creatively. We have to think in different ways. And, certainly if we were crafting a different kind of afternoon for a student, right? Maybe we're talking about just having them connect with their peers, doing some team building or those kinds of activities. It might be possible for teachers, to work with students and we might gain in terms of, coming up with what is a compromise that gives teachers that valuable time that they need. I think our principals have tried to be really creative in saying, okay, like they want to be very upfront about that cost benefit analysis of all of the different scenarios. And I think we've all got to continue to do thinking in different ways.
See that Sue has her hand up.
Jess, did you have something that you wanted to connect with this? Because mine is a little bit different. So if you want to go first, go ahead.
Thank you, Sue. Yeah. So I too am we've never had the offer of subs to come and help with screening appointments. So I think that that's fabulous thinking. But I jumped to, and I'm sure my colleagues do too, the logistical pieces of what that looks like. So when I think about a substitute is inside the classroom with, well, first of all, the purpose of all of this is for the teacher to connect with kids. So now I've taken the teacher away so the teacher can do screenings one-on-one, which is great, but where do they go? What do they do? We still have this major space issue in our K2 buildings. The only option would be for those 12 or 13 homerooms to each teacher goes out into the hallway at a table where they're with other teachers and other students in the hallway doing screening appointments. Not in their classroom, they can't close a door, they can't be in an environment that feels a little bit cozier than the hallway. So that just thinking about that made it feel is that worth it? Is that really the place where we want them to be while the rest of their class is in the room with a substitute, having team building or other kinds of fun stuff. So.
Just one more piece to add on to that, and is just that we just don't have subs. We just don't have subs. And where will we get those people and where are they right now? Because we need them every single day. So that I would just hate to build a plan based on something that day of may not come to fruition. So that's the tricky part. And so, can we add, yeah, I'm just not sure. I mean, I would feel more comfortable. I think that the leaders here, we're advocating certainly for our first plan, our original plan, but that option 5 that you've come back with is close to that if that's something that the policy committee can live with. I think that that's a compromise that we can also live with and accomplish much of our goals, more so than thinking about a sub situation or something completely different.
I know Sue has something, but it's different than this. So if I could just add to this topic and then let Sue go. But I think that just to close out the sub topic, I think having subs for other things is great, but when you're trying to establish routines for the beginning of the school year, that can be really tricky. And that's part of building that safety and security for kids is what is your routine? What's your connection to your primary teacher? So I can see a lot of classroom teachers thinking that feels really unsafe to start the year, not being able to set those routines for kids and having to delay that. So while the spirit of that is in the right place, I can see that not feeling great. And I feel like we're kind of crossing the line from what are the days of the calendar that we're setting at the beginning of the year to what are we as leaders able to do with those days. So, you know, I think that's our role to plan that and to decide what to do with that. And I think there has to be a level of trust there that we're able to set those activities. So that's what we do.
Sue, do you want to go?
Yeah, I just didn't want to step on that conversation because I'm going to take it from a little bit different angle. While I very much support the K-5 needs and the littles and what they need to do, that screening that needs to be done, they have some very different aspects to their school start than we do at the high school level. But I did want to just say a couple of things. When we talk to the high school kids, they tell us repeatedly that if they're going to be in school, they want to be doing their classes. They just like that routine, and that's what feels important. But I want to reassure Leanne that we're looking at creative ways to leverage time with the high schoolers to get underneath some of that SEL stuff. Like, for example, we're talking for us during our A Easton advisory time, our student services department does not have groups at that time. So we're talking about them building a schedule to go in and meet with small groups, 10 to 15 students at a time, and go over some supportive things with them. Our social workers are going to develop a schedule to get in and meet with those small groups. We're going to use that AE's time to meet maybe with slightly larger groups to go over some easing back into school and how we might help and how they might work on some getting back used to a full in-person schedule. So we really are going to leverage our AE's time in some creative ways to be giving that support. And we're hoping that kids will be more accepting of that if, number one, they're getting to go to their classes like they're asking to. And number two, it's maybe in a little bit shorter spurt, those 35 minutes. We can do some creative work with that time and kind of get a little bit of both things going for our students right away. So I did just want to reiterate that we really are planning some things to give that SEL support and time, but maybe in a way that our age group is going to be a little bit more invested in it with us. So I just want to reassure you that we really are thinking about how we're going to do some of those pieces carefully with our students.
Yeah, and I'll just add that, so we're doing the same thing at the middle school. So for the sixth graders first day and then their next day, it's mostly SEL activities, getting to know their teachers, getting to know the students in their class, and moving around the building. And the next week, the first full week of school, well, I think we're off Monday, we're going to be building in SEL activities for all grades, you know, during that week. And it'll continue to be a theme throughout the year, but we'll definitely have more than we have in the past.
I shared with the board and with Kathy that for that first one fleeting Wednesday, that it was that at least from my students' perspective, that was really successful, and so thank you for that. And you know, that she really appreciated it and noticed it, and I think that's really cool that you know, somebody that age actually, it's like, my social and emotional needs were met today. You know, it was really pretty cool.
And I do really appreciate you sharing that, because that was the goal. I mean,
yeah.
You know, we heard from families that that's really why they're looking for increased school time, is for their, you know, kids to make those connections. So thank you, nice weather.
Yeah, I know.
Allowed us to be outside more and mix students a little bit.
Yeah, that was great. I did want to just circle back to Kelly, thank you for clarifying about the preparatory versus the instruction time. I just wanted to indicate that I sometimes use those things sort of as lay terms. I wasn't using it necessarily as like a way you would use the word preparatory. so I understand the distinction and probably didn't clarify that well. I guess one thing that I'm having a hard time with is sometimes these discussions feel like us versus you as administration, and I find that hard because I know we're all working towards the same goal. The slideshow is somewhat makes me feel that way because I can't remember the words were like all of the options that weren't the original proposal don't meet the needs of students. And so that for me is not something that I really want the community to hear. I don't want to really feel that way either. That what we're advocating for is something that's going to not meet the needs of students. And so I understand that we all have a difference of opinion, and you know, you have a different not perspective, I guess, but a different focus than we do at times, even though it is all, you know, necessarily student centered. And so you know, I just don't want to feel like, well, if we support option 5 or option 2, we're supporting something that doesn't meet the needs of our students. I mean, we're all, I think, doing the best that we can with the same goal in mind. And so, you know, for anybody watching to say, well, they voted on something that's not going to meet the needs of students. I mean, I think it's just a difference of opinion about what that balance is.
Yeah, I can appreciate that, Alisha. I think I don't remember a time when we've ever had 5 counter proposals to something we put forward. I mean, and I've been here for 17 years, so you know, I think that was a little startling, and we just want to make sure that you understand what's being lost by not going forward with something that we present. You know, I think sometimes we get feedback that, well, you guys didn't put forward a clear enough proposal, or you guys didn't make a clear enough recommendation. And I think sometimes that's probably true. And so this was a very clear recommendation that's based on evidence and based on experience. And we just want to make sure that you understand that this is what will not happen if you don't go with it.
I know, but we could present our information sort of in the same way, right?
You're right. And so we don't have that information. Like, we don't know what you're basing that on. And so we don't, that's what this conversation could be, right? It doesn't have, it's not adversarial. It's just like, okay, so let's talk about it, because we don't necessarily have those conversations with each other.
Well, I mean, what happened, I think, is that we had the presentation from administration and didn't really have any, I was surprised by it. I was surprised that there was like a slideshow, and usually we're just presented with a calendar, and it's, you know, I was not aware that we were going to be presented with something fairly different than what we usually are. And so, and then I think the 5 proposals were as a result of our then saying, okay, we don't agree with what they came to us originally, but can we come up with other suggestions that we would feel comfortable with, because, you know, Diane was going to go back to you guys. And so we talked about it, like, these are things that, you know, seemed like a middle ground, and maybe we should have had you there. I don't know. I mean,
I think we offered, I mean, I know that I offered to be at the last meeting, and was told that it was not, we weren't needed at that meeting. But one of the things that I would want the public to know is that what we're presenting is not our opinion. So, I mean, it is based in our lived experience as educational leaders with this community and their families and these kids, and that we're making these recommendations based on our professional expertise, and that we have been like not even neck deep, like we're drowning, in pandemic teaching and learning, and this is not our opinion. And I do feel a little bit like emotional about that, because I have opinions about a lot of things. But this, I'm trying, and I know my colleagues are trying really hard to advocate as strongly as we can for kids, because that is our work. And again, like, we have been thick in it, and I know you guys see that, and I know that you value us in that way. But I really I obviously bristle at that word, that this was our opinion.
Well, I mean, everything's an opinion unless if it's based in research. So that's not to be discrediting to what you're putting forth. I mean, I think that the goal of this is that there are checks and balances in the system for a reason, and it's okay for us to disagree. What I'm saying is the fact that we disagree, the argument could be made that your proposals don't meet the needs of kids too. And so I just don't like the feeling of what you're accepting is, or what you're proposing doesn't meet the needs of kids. In my opinion, that's your opinion, because it's not based in research.
Well, I guess we can understand why it feels like it's us against you, Alisha, because this doesn't feel very collaborative at this point. It's, I guess I'm having a hard time understanding why you're coming at us so strongly in this way of, why does it have to be one or the other?
What do you mean by that, Kelly? I mean, my original thought when that was presented was that was something that I didn't support. And so we talked about things that we could support. And the response here is, well, all of your suggestions don't meet the needs of kids.
No.
Is what the slideshow said.
No, these are the things that would be lost from our proposal if you choose number one. This is what will be. We won't have time to do our original screening or to meet with kids. It's not that it doesn't support kids. It's what doesn't support our original proposal, which we think supports kids the best. I mean, that's just what we put forward. We wouldn't have put it forward if we didn't think that that's what it did. So, could we have worded it a little bit differently? I don't know. I'd have to look at it. But it's not to say you guys aren't supporting kids. We would never say that. But it's to say you can make an informed decision of these 5. If you're not going to support our proposal, which it doesn't sound like you're going to, then you can make an informed decision. This is our opinion, I guess, about which one of these we think will give us the best of what we've put forward. That's all.
I can see where you were coming from, Alisha, with that. That was not our intention. Our process was to, okay, there are 5 proposals here. All right, what is lost, what is gained with each one of those, okay? And so for option 1, I'm just like going back to it. Option 1, okay, so in that one, we don't get to meet the families before. So we were going through it as an exercise in that way, not like, if we do this, it's bad for kids. It was more just like, what is the checklist of things that were lost or gained from each.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that. And I think it's important for us to hear that, because we're not in the schools. I think it's just that the slideshow says unmet student needs is the heading. And then we're going to say, oh, let's vote on the unmet student needs. To me, it feels like,
yeah, that feels unfair.
Well, and we do that the same way with the budget, right? I mean, I guess that's just, we're used to doing that. Like, if we don't put this in the budget, it's an unmet need. I mean, it's not.
Thought it was language that would be familiar and make sense. And I guess, kind of to like turn the corner a little bit, we haven't heard from you guys what where the rub is in our original plan yet. I know we made some assumptions about it, but we actually haven't heard from you guys. Like, what is it about that first plan that feels uncomfortable, or that you don't feel like you could support? And if you could share that with us, I think that would help us come to a compromise or a solution.
Well, I guess, we've had that discussion. I guess from my perspective, I don't want this to be an adversarial conversation. I feel like this is, I just feel like that if you could pull up the slide, maybe the first slide. So I don't want to argue it, I guess is my thought, because where's the one with the first,
It's slide 3, Diane. Yep.
yeah, thank you.
Back one.
Is this the one that you're looking for? I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to visualize it.
Yeah, and and if I could just jump in, the other thing that I would say is everything that we have been doing in this past year, there are no clear directions that things have pointed into, right? And so we've needed to make decision after decision, and there's never a clear path. There's never a clear answer. There's never like, oh my goodness, if we just do this, then that will satisfy the needs of everyone. And so I think that's one of the things that is making this conversation even more challenging, because we all do have the best intentions in mind, and we're trying to come up with what is that sweet spot, right? And in our last policy meeting, when you did kind of go through the proposal with me and you were coming up with those questions, like you had some great ideas about some other ways to look at things. And, I recall saying, is there a number, do you want to quantify it in time? Like, is there an amount of time that would work that we could go back to the team and they could do some thinking about? But this is really tough stuff.
And, maybe it's unfortunate that everybody wasn't here last time, because we did have really great discussions. And I think when you asked that question, there wasn't an answer to that. It was just sort of like, well, where can we find sort of a balance between, what seems like a lot versus what would be too little that could still meet the needs of, consider the needs of everybody involved. I felt like we had those discussions, felt like they were really positive. It sounds like that the 5 proposals might have been somewhat off-putting, and I'm sorry for that. It was sort of like that was the ask, as I understood it, from Diane, to sort of come up with some suggestions that would work. And so that's what we tried to do. And that wasn't in any way to try to say, we think that this is our responsibility, not yours. It was more like Diane said, do you have some ideas to go back to them so that we can get to some place where we can all agree? And so ultimately, it sounds like option 5 is something that we can all agree, if we can burn the slideshow and not have that go forward as why, or just with people with a caveat, who may not have had the benefit of the whole conversation to understand that this is sort of a long discussion where everybody has put forth their ideas and talked about it, and no matter what, there's going to be unmet student needs, and we're all trying to do the best we can to find that middle ground.
And I guess go ahead, Cindy.
I just wonder, it feels like we're kind of stuck, right? And I mean, realistically, at some point, the board's going to take a vote, is my assumption. I mean, should we just bring it to the board and let them take a vote? Or are you trying to get to a better resolution today?
I feel like we were just about to get a little unstuck, actually.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Me too. I mean, I think that I think 5 is I'm okay with that. That's one of the reasons why. you know, I just felt uncomfortable saying, oh, if you're okay with 5, I'm okay with 5, with that, with knowing that sometimes people only watch parts of things, and that's the message. And, you know, I certainly, well, you said that I was coming at you. I certainly didn't mean to present that way. It was just felt uncomfortable for me to say, okay, I'm going to support this when the title says unmet student needs. And so I'm not trying to come at you at all. And actually it helped reveal sort of an underlying concern from, I don't remember if it was you or Jess that said that, what, you know, why would you, or maybe it was Anne, why would you come with 5 proposals when, you know, that was sort of the task, and obviously you didn't know that was what had happened. So, I mean, it's a good discussion. Ultimately, I'm glad we can get through that. I feel better having discussed it, and I really, more importantly than the way I feel, is that, you know, I want the public to understand that this is something that we're all trying to come up with, that's a middle ground between all of the competing interests of various subgroups.
And Alisha, I think that's where it would have, when we think about like that, we got 5 plans back to us. We didn't get context for why, and that's what I'm just trying to still understand. For that complete transparency, is like the K-5 leaders presented a plan and they got 5 counter proposals back. But that middle part about like why, like we still don't have clarity. And that's why we had to try to, you know, when you don't have the information, you try to fill in the gaps for yourself. And that's what I really am asking from you guys, is if you could tell us what that was for you and why that didn't sit well with you, then, you know, that's the give and take collaborative conversation that I know that you guys want and that we want. But we weren't part of that last time.
Well, I mean, I guess my concern is, Jessica, I don't want this to devolve into you know, us versus them, or, you know, I think that in-person instruction full-time is something that I'm hearing is important. And I understand that there are competing interests of social emotional needs as well as needs for testing, and that some people have the opinion that social emotional needs are going to be met best by just getting in there, and some people think that it's best met with an ease of transition. And so you know, we had this long discussion about it at the last policy meeting, and it's all there. But that was sort of why I personally didn't support that calendar, and that's why.
I don't want to prolong the conversation because I think we are getting to some understanding, which is good. But I do think it's important for the public, people who are listening, who may play this back, to understand the history, that this is not a typical way we operate, right? Like, this was not our usual business to bring proposals like this to the policy committee about the calendar, have you all approve it, then make the next step. In the past, the board has set the calendar with the days, and then we've been given sort of permission to do what we want with them within those days. So this was a total new way of doing business for us to some degree. So I think that was part of the learning curve as well. So I just want anybody who's listening to realize that this is not something that happens regularly every year. You know, this was the first time we've ever done this as a team like this. So I think there's some learning for all of us in our communication and in our team work and in our collaboration to learn from this, so that next year we don't have these hurdles, because hopefully next year, the year after, will be much better, right? So
that's a great point. Yeah, thank you for raising that. And so that the reason why we're doing this is because of board policy, and it sounds like maybe that hadn't been followed previously. And so maybe next year we can have a conversation in advance to sort of discuss ideas of how it could go smoother so that we don't get stuck again. Hopefully we don't have another year like this year, and so it won't be, you know, as as different as it was this year. For me, it was a lot to process at once, and it seemed, you know, of course, it was the worst year for it to happen. And so, I think if I'll say one thing for me to have the information in advance is a lot. Is really beneficial for me. So then I can process and think of ideas and ask questions, and then I just feel like it moves forward faster. So thank you for raising. I think that's a good point. I think the question is, I've already said I can live with option 5. I could have lived with any of those options. Leanne and April, where do you fall on those options?
I can live with option 5.
Can we
Sorry,
say
April.
option 5 again? Nope, sorry, I keep talking over you too. Do you mind, Diane, just so I can visualize it again? Okay, so it's taking those second half days and making them full days. So 2 half days and 2 full days instead of 4 half days.
So they won't have like a half day in their smaller group. The half days will just be the full group.
Gotcha.
That's kind of the major difference.
Thank you.
Do you have an answer?
Do I have an answer? You can take it down, Diane, so we can see each other. Like, you want to know what my recommendation is? Or my...
Well, the committee needs to put forward a recommendation.
Right.
So I think you know, the way we've been doing it is by consensus. Well, actually, I think we're usually unanimous, but otherwise we've done it by consensus. But I mean, I want to have that conversation. I know that you supported the original proposal, it sounds like.
Yeah, and I think that's where I still am at. I think if I really have to ask myself the hard question that I think Jessica asked the best is, what's the rub, right? Like, why am I not in favor of the 4 half days, but the 2 half days and the 2 full days feels more palatable? And if I could get to the root of that answer and be really satisfied and like really grounded in that answer, then I think I would support, you know, the number 5, but I can't give you a good answer. My answer is because I worry that it's a lot of time outside of the classroom for the kids at the beginning of the year, and that maybe it's too slow. Like that maybe that is too slow and it won't be best for all students. But again, back to where we let off, we're all trying to make decisions in the best interest of the kids. And it's okay to have a difference of opinion. It's okay to see those 4 half days and say, whoa, I just think that's too slow, versus, well, we could try it that way and maybe it won't be too slow. And I think that's literally, for me at this point, just a difference of opinion. I'm not in the schools. I do have a bunch of small children. So, and we say this all the time too, we come at this from a different place based on our own experiences. And I try really hard not to say charged things, because I would never, ever want this to perpetuate to feel this us versus them. For me, I'm in a place where I have my building administrators advocating for something to me and presenting me with what is, in their opinion, going to be lost if we don't support the plan that they originally presented. I don't have really strong convictions about reducing their plan. And so my thought is I would still be in favor of their original plan.
Okay, so we're supposed to forth a recommendation. What are your thoughts about how to do that with the fact that we're not in total agreement?
Yeah, so, you know, this is not my committee, this is your committee. And so as chair of the policy committee, I think you would present a recommendation, and you could say, this was not a unanimous recommendation. I don't feel the need to speak or necessarily advocate for my position. I've done that here. And so I'm fully comfortable and understand that the recommendation of the policy committee is not necessarily my recommendation. And so I would support the recommendation of the policy committee, you know, in front of the full board, if that's the recommendation that comes out of the committee.
Okay, I just want to make sure that you're not, you know, that you're comfortable with that and that.
I mean, I understand that these things happen. I mean, I've lost my share of opinion points on finance, so this would not be the first time. You know, but I get it.
Okay.
Just a question, Alisha, and I don't know procedurally if this would even be okay, but would you ever bring forward like option 5 and the first option to the full board and say, you know, this is what the policy committee is bringing forward, and have that full conversation, or would that just belabor a point?
Well, that was sort of what I was, I mean, it's not really, it's sort of, from my perspective, it sort of is contrary to the reason why we have the committee work. But I also recognize that this is an important decision and that there's differences of opinion. And I agree with April, you know, the building administration feels strongly about this. And so, you know, I certainly don't want to manipulate my opinion to manipulate the ultimate outcome. And that's why I was having that conversation with April. So I worry that, my thought process is, I worry that if we don't have a recommendation, that we're going to be doing this all over again at a board level. And this has been uncomfortable, right? To have these discussions. But I think respectful, and I think that we've all, you know, been able to say why, you know, where we are and why. And so that's great. I just would hate for us to get bogged down again and then not be able to move forward. And that's my concern. And which is sort of why I was hemming and hawing with April, like, you know, how comfortable are you with bringing forward this recommendation? Because I don't want to manipulate that of a recommendation. So
My from a procedural standpoint, my hope would be, and I can put this in my midweek check-in for the board, Alisha, it would probably make more sense coming from you because you're the chair, just what our recommendation is in advance of the meeting so that people can look at it and see what the recommendation is ahead of time, so that we're not trying to present it and talk people through it. And that way Kelly could also post the board's or the policy committee's recommendation in our packet so that people would know what the recommendation was going to be, and that might inform their public comment. It might not, but.
Okay. We haven't talked about Wednesdays. What
I was going to bring up.
Look, it's getting late. What's the board's role in the Wednesday discussion, and what's the policy committee's role in the Wednesday discussion is my question.
So the Wednesday piece is part of the school calendar. So if we're going by the policy, it would be, you know, the same conversation that we've just been having about the start of school in terms of the recommendation from the committee.
Knew that. I was just hoping for a different answer. Hey, do we want to open that up to discussion? Don't all jump.
Monique has her hand up.
We have data from the surveys that was shared. It seems as if the data was pretty consistent around a preference for an early release model rather than a late start model. And then in terms of Wednesdays, parents much preferred a once a month, about 67%. And then interestingly enough, second was weekly and third was biweekly. Teachers or staff, they much preferred weekly, and that's why we originally as a leadership council brought that forward. And then staff next in line was once a month, and then bi-weekly. Diane, if you could share that screen again. Right now, please be reminded that our staff have 3 hours, 3.5 hours every Wednesday, and are hard pressed to do more than just plan for their students. And we have a lot on our plates. The DEI work, the curriculum audits, the equity audits. We also have, we know we have some gaps and some issues in literacy, particularly K-5 and even into middle school. We need to work with staff on that. We have not been able to vertically articulate any of our curriculum areas this year. And what we found is that teachers valued grade level planning meetings. So this is just a visual of the list of things that we've been unable to effectively address. So in reality, even if we had every Wednesday for 90 minutes, we're still asking for less than half of what we had this year, and we've been unable to meet those needs. That said, I totally understand the perspective of our families that they want our students in school every day. We want our students in school every day as well, but we want to do a good job with our students. And if we are going to be growing and addressing some of the concerns that have surfaced from our families in regard to our curriculum, in regard to SEL this year, we need that time with staff. And know that whatever time this group decides upon, we will maximize and make the best use of that. But we may not get as far as certainly we would want to get with every Wednesday for our students. So I share that with you as just a reminder of the work that's on the table, some of which is board driven. I certainly would like to support every Wednesday moving forward, and yet I understand the concerns expressed.
Tony, can you, for those of us who are not in the field, can you explain how that looks, like what a Wednesday looks like for a teacher?
Currently?
Well, I guess with like just the proposal for next year, what that would look like, or what you're envisioning it.
We would most likely break that time up in terms of one of the pieces that has been very successful are our professional learning teams, where teachers have choice about what to work on to improve their own practice, and they work in collaborative groups. We would most likely continue with that practice in terms of having that most likely once a month, if not a little more than that, depending on what that is. We know we have a need for cross grade level conversations And we would probably allocate one of those days for that purpose. We know we need to do some very specific, direct training in terms of the diversity, equity, and inclusion work. That would most likely be one of those Wednesdays every month. We know we need to do more research and study in terms of where our curriculum is to gather more data around those pieces and to make recommendations and adjustments. We would use time for that as well. So it would be a combination of choice time for teachers focused on professional learning and some targeted pieces specifically in line with where we're going and what our needs are as a district for our students.
Does that occur at the building level in person?
It depends. Yes, but it also depends on what that might be. For example, I'm going to be working with the K-12 SEL committee, or I'm in the process of scheduling dates. We're trying to identify. We're looking at evidence-based programming, and then to design the professional development to implement that. So teachers will need time to focus on those pieces as well. So that may mean a consultant coming in on certain Wednesdays and working with teachers across K-5, or it may be someone coming in and working directly for one particular phase level. We do need the input of our staff in helping to craft the PD moving forward and to identify the programmatic pieces as well.
Thank you.
So the thinking is, if our students are in school, our staff will be in school as well, participating in this professional development. We long for the opportunity for our staff to all be together in one room or one space. We know that there will most likely still be masking requirements and things like that. But with vaccines and our staff becoming more and more vaccinated every day as we speak, I'm looking forward to having that be in-person training.
Thank you for explaining that. Ellie, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think one of the great opportunities that this year has presented for teachers that K-5 in particular has struggled with was teachers being able to meet regularly together because our schedules just have not allowed that other than after school. So there are some pieces that are, I guess the way I would put it is really closer to kids, not that curriculum isn't close to kids, but in terms of looking at student data and planning for instruction, as Monique mentioned, but being able to get together with your grade level colleagues weekly and just talk about kids and look at kids and be able to do that on a regular basis and involve the social worker or the nurse or the principal and really target what kids need is really it takes a huge amount of time, but it's a huge advantage for our schools. And I think going into next year with having more kids in the building and acclimating more kids, and I would assume having more issues, I think that time is really going to be needed. And I think about not having that weekly opportunity, and it gives me a little bit of a heart palpitation because I just know how much, how important that time has become in just being able to touch base and meet student needs. And so it's not making copies and it's not just, making worksheets. It's really digging into what students need. So I just wanted to mention that.
Kelly, Jessica?
I would echo everything Kelly said, and I think we've talked about this before maybe, but the time that teachers have together in conversation is what, excuse me, you may have to come back to me. I'm out of water. Okay. Okay. The time that teachers have in conversation with each other is really what like solidifies that professional development. I sound awful. Maybe I should put this in the chat. So they don't get that time together to have those conversations unless we build that into their day, because all the other meetings that we have are scheduled for them. So this past year, they could talk about the equity, diversity, and inclusion work within their day because we had this time built in. They can talk about social and emotional PD. They can talk about all the other things in addition to everything that Kelly Mullins just described about student learning. I'm so sorry, I don't know what happened.
No, I mean, and Monique, you probably know the statistic, but is it at 21 times it takes an adult to practice something before they really get it or something like that. So I don't know, maybe I'm pulling that out of my ear, but you think about the PD that we provide for folks. And if you're trying to learn a new strategy, or, you know, you took a webinar or you read something, to just like our kids, to be able to talk about that and practice it and bounce it off of somebody. I mean, that's, like Jess is saying, that's what really solidifies it. And our teachers haven't had that other than kind of on the fly in the hallway time, or, you know, after school at a meeting. So they've really benefited from that. And that's where we have a lot of pots on the stove, so to speak, of work, whether it's SEL or, you know, equity, diversity and inclusion, and a bunch of other stuff. There's a whole Thanksgiving dinner that's just cooking away. And then just the business of kids that is always cooking. So there's a lot going on.
Thank you. Ian?
Yeah, I don't know whether you all have heard this at your school, but every once in a while at Eight Corners, we get parents who say, why did that teacher do this and that teacher did it that way? Or why did one child get this and another child got that? And sometimes we even hear, those second graders at Pleasant Hill did lab reports. Are Eight Corners kids going to get to do experiments and lab reports? And I don't know whether you hear that. That's something that happens here. So I'm just going to talk from my experience. But one of the things that Wednesday afternoons gives us is the opportunity for teachers to give a guaranteed and viable curriculum. So those aha moments, those great ideas that teachers have and how they present that same material gets to be shared with each other. Otherwise, they never have time to talk to each other across buildings, much less sometimes across the grade levels in the same building, because they don't have the same planning time. They don't have the same lunch time. They don't always have the same prep time and time off to talk about how did that lesson go in writing that was lab reports, and how did you present it? And my kids loved this. So those conversations are so rich and so important. And there's just never enough time or opportunity for those to happen. So that's why Wednesday afternoons can be so incredibly important for that guaranteed and viable curriculum to really be as rich and as equitable and inclusive as possible. So I didn't mean to be flip or anything, but that, you know, I think that's so important. When I have 4 second grade teachers, I have 5 this year, and 2 of them are off at one part of the day, 2 of them are off at a completely different part of the day, and they never cross paths, even in my building that isn't as big as Wentworth. So how they plan to stay cohesive and collaborative and together on things when they never have a minute to do this during the day. So that, you know, that's the most important part, in my opinion, of those Wednesday afternoons. There's a million things we can do. Keeping teachers enriched with each other's experiences and collaborate and connected is priceless.
Thank you. April, Leanne, Sandy, Diane.
I'll go. I hear what everybody is saying, and I feel like the Grinch. I know how important the PD time is. I've heard from so many staff members what they have gotten from this. But I also know that we need our children to be someplace safe when they're released early. Community Services has been very vocal in the fact that they will not support every Wednesday. They can't support every Wednesday. Not sure the rationale behind it, but they are unable to. And that puts us in a big hole for childcare. Childcare is already at a premium in Scarborough. I don't know what our families are going to do every single Wednesday. I don't think we can assume that everybody is able to work from home or has the flexibility to have Wednesdays off. I wish we could, because I do think there's value to this. I just don't think that it's possible right now, on top of everything else that people have come through, to add one more thing on the parents' plates. And I know that while we're talking about what is in the best interest of the children in the rooms and with their teachers, absolutely PD is so critical, but they also need to have that same support at home. And if they're not going to be, if we can't provide someplace for them to be where parents can still go back to work, I don't feel comfortable with the plan, because we just don't have another option for these kids.
And I know that, thank you, Leanne. Diane, I know that you've been super busy, but have you been able to confirm with Community Services that that is the status of Wednesdays?
I did talk with Audra and Todd last week, and unfortunately that is the status. They're really struggling even to find people for their summer camp program right now. And so, just like every other industry in the state, there are openings everywhere. And I know that, I wish I could say, oh yes, I talked to them and they came up with another solution. Isn't that great? But that would not be the case, as every other difficult problem we try to solve, has downfalls. And I would, I certainly understand where you're coming from, Leanne, in terms of, how else could we crack that nut, right? Like, I think that's where I'm kind of going in my head as I'm listening to all of you talk. Like, what else could we make for an experience for our kids? Is this a time where, we've had so many folks say, ask us for help, we want to help you. Is there the possibility that, that might come to fruition? I'm not sure.
Which would be phenomenal if it could.
I agree.
To me, that is where the village comes in handy. And if people could come back and assure us that we had coverage, oh yeah, I totally could be on board with this.
Yeah, because I think the reality is, as you've heard, Monique talk a lot, we have a lot that we want to accomplish in our district right now, right? And we've got to find the time to help our staff become more knowledgeable, especially, like, I'll just use like the diversity, equity, and inclusion work, right? Like, we have a lot of work ahead for us, and our students are the recipients of the benefits of that, right? Like, we have to close the loop on that. Sure, we definitely want our teachers to be more knowledgeable, but the reason why we want them to be more knowledgeable is so that our kids can have better outcomes.
Thank you, Diane, for checking with them and confirming that. I love your comment about the creative thinking, and I just feel like in the recent years, we've just been in panic mode so much that we can't get into that phase. And it's like, we all want to do that. And I can't wait till we're back into a place where we can start being more proactive.
The one thing I wanted to just kind of put out there is, like, the tricky part to kind of wrap my head around is that I know that there are neighboring districts who do this and have been doing this for years. Portland and Saco and Wyndham have had early release every Wednesday for years and years and years. And so I just wonder, like, it seems almost like a catch-22. Like, it seems like this year is the year to try to transition to that, at the same time that it is not the year to try to transition to that, model of every single, having that consistent time for professional development, which we know is so critically important. And I'm not hearing anybody here say that they disagree with that. It is the balance of the needs. So that's the part that I'm wrestling with.
Thanks, Kelly. I've been having the same discussion of, it's like, if not this year, when? But on the other hand, it's almost like this year's, I don't know.
I can speak just, and my voice is back now, but I've lived in Portland and Saco the whole time we've lived in Maine. And so I've never been in a school district that didn't have an early release every Wednesday. And coming from Georgia to Portland, it was a shock. I mean, our family, I was like, you do what? Every Wednesday? So I totally get like the whole, like, what do you do with your kids? And my kids were in elementary school at the time. But you do, like, I think it was Leanne that said, like, you've got to find your village, and there's community services. Sometimes, there's things that I've never had the option to not have to figure it out. And I'm not trying to come across as insensitive in any way, shape, or form, but I want to give families credit for their ability to figure out what they need to do for their kids, because the communities around us and the families that live in those communities have been resourceful, smart, they've leaned on each other, and they figured it out. And I am one of those people who've been doing it, the whole time that we've lived in Maine, which has been 8 years. And it was hard, but we definitely figured it out.
Yeah, I just think about kicking that can down the road in terms of, we keep saying, it's critical, and that classroom teacher is so critical to our kids, and we have to fuel them. And it's getting harder and harder to fuel them because they have more and more on their plate, and it's harder and harder to maintain quality teachers because they're not as motivated to come into the profession. And we're going to have a teacher shortage. I don't know what year it's going to hit, but Monique could probably tell you, because it is not an easy job. So we have to find ways to fuel our teachers and to sustain the profession of education. And we're going to have to think creatively about that as a board and as a leadership team as we move forward out of this pandemic and beyond, because thinking about teaching in 1985 and that teachers are going to do it all after school and on the weekends is not sustainable. We have to create and carve out time and that professional time within their day to meet and to receive some of that PD. And sure, they're always going to have stuff that they're going to do outside of school, but we have to be responsible for some of that. And if we have to do a multi-year plan to build up to that, then maybe we need to start working on what that looks like and start thinking and being proactive now and crafting that. And maybe it's not going to happen all this year, but
I was just thinking that, like, what would it take to get there? What are the barriers? And
right. So the community can kind of see it coming, but we start that mindset shift of, this is an important thing, and that it's not, we don't just keep pushing that need of our district and our staff down the road. It's not kids or teachers. It's a package deal.
Yeah.
I almost think the timing is right to do it. I honestly don't think there's a parent out there that could argue that this is not important for our kids and staff. And it could be an opportunity more so now than ever to take the leap and do it. There's just never been enough time in my career for people to have staff development to do the work. And I think right now people really value educators more than ever. And so I would argue that it's an opportunity. The timing might be right.
Thanks, Sandy. Oh,
All on me.
you don't have to, but what are you thinking?
I'm thinking, oh gosh. I mean, Kelly said it great. Like, is this, is this the year to do this, or is this really not the year to do this? I think that every single one of us that resonates with. And then, our other Kelly says something else that really resonated with me, which is, how do we build to this? Right. And so I just feel like getting this news from community services that they can't support this it's almost just a non-starter, which stinks, because they're, to everyone's point, no one is saying that this isn't valuable, that isn't something that our teachers and then our kids would benefit so much from. But, having all of those kids that don't have a plan, in a normal year, this would be plenty of time to give the families a heads up that they need to build their tribe and, figure this out. But, maybe not this year. Maybe that is just one ask too much to say, this is the year when you need to figure this out for Wednesday. Ugh, I don't know.
Monique?
What about the notion, I'm just going to put it out there and slice and dice, is proposing bi-weekly this year so that it's still a reduction over what we have right now. And that's going to be challenging for our staff, as is weekly. So it's a reduction in time for our staff. And as I said, we'll make maximum, we take great pride in getting great value from every dollar spent and every resource. And our most valuable resource is time. With a charge for exploring or working with community services to see what kinds of supports we could build towards moving towards a weekly Wednesday piece moving forward. While, one of the things we've puzzled out over the years is, okay, how can we use our ed tech staff to cover so that teachers could work, or how do we use, current staff? And one of the challenges is our ed tech staff are involved in the professional development. So everyone is involved in the professional development, but do we look at it in a way in which how we schedule on Wednesday afternoon, it's worth exploring some possibilities, because it's also a time that if we had sufficient numbers of staff, we could offer some students some sorts of experiences, whether that be additional academic support or enrichment or something. I'm just trying to think of some creative ideas to assist. But we're dealing with lots of kids and not a lot of staff. So I'm just wondering if maybe in this next year, we take a step and then look towards adding that to our plate of things, to think creatively about how might we expand that time and provide supports for our families in addition to community services.
I have a dog that's barking, so I was trying to stay muted.
I thought that was just feedback.
I like that idea, Monique, and I like the idea of, some time to prepare for It would be tricky in this year, not knowing what the group gathering limits will continue to be next year, not knowing what the physical distancing requirements are going to be, to think about 700 kids and however many hourly staff and how and where and cross cohorting and all of that kind of stuff. So I like the idea of easing in next year with moving forward, moving toward an every Wednesday option with some potential on-site availability, because hopefully the pandemic will be really long gone by that time.
And it certainly would have, it could potentially have budget implications. But that would give us some time to prepare. It would also give us some time to get a sense of where what community services is able to offer moving forward. Just a wonder.
One of my thoughts about that, and we may be moving a little bit beyond this scope of this discussion, but I do think it's a good discussion to have. It's sort of that proactive versus reactive stuff that we're talking about is, I think communicating that to the community is going to be key. And so I wonder if we could get the communications committee involved in that, even though it's not necessarily going to be a board thing up front until it gets to the calendar piece, but it might make sense to sort of just have that discussion. So, you know, my concern is the community services piece as well. I find it interesting that it's sort of the lay person opinion versus the professional opinion in terms of the survey data and who supports what. And it makes me wonder why that is, if that's the convenience factor, or that for those of us outside of the field, we don't understand fully the value of that time. And I don't know what that is. I mean, I guess I recognize that. I mean, I engage in professional development in my career. I recognize the value of professional development, but I think it's hard to understand fully what it's like in the educational field if you're not living it. So that's interesting. April?
I also think that we should probably recognize that we have a community right now that is aching to get their children back to school 5 days a week in person full time. And so they may or may not have expressed that via this survey. So there's a possibility that those two topics got conflated timing wise.
Yeah. Sue?
Am I correct that we stated that both surveys listed the biweekly as the last option in the preference? So in that data, it doesn't jive with what we've been discussing. I just wanted to point that out.
Yet it was consistent. That was a point of consistency. So that might have value. I'm not sure.
So
is the assumption though, Monique, that if people supported weekly, that then they would also maybe support bi-weekly? And so you can combine those two categories in the data rather than just looking at the bi-weekly piece. I know for me, like if I said weekly, the idea that you would do it bi-weekly would still be better than doing it monthly. So to me,
it was a right choice. Yeah.
Right. But again,
People
surveys
trying to get,
I mean, there's entire courses on how to write a survey.
and to get ranked choice voting.
Right.
One of the things that I know as a parent, and that's not really obviously my, I don't want to say concern, but you know, we need to be looking at it from the the student's perspective at all times is how chaotic a change of schedule is, and trying to manage that. So I wondered if bi-weekly people were just like, oh, that would be a huge mess to manage. Like what week am I? And I wondered if there was a little bit of that in the responses.
Years ago when we went down this route, that was some of the feedback we got, is that it is a lot easier to do something consistently every week than periodically. And even now we have to remind folks, okay, this is, and we tried to put it in some sort of a pattern within the calendar. Okay, folks, this is an early release day, or this is a late start day. So yeah, routine is always desirable. And it's a lot easier if it's a weekly routine. And yet we've also learned that folks can adjust.
Yeah. Well, and that's sort of the irony right behind this conversation, is that community services not being available is one of the major concerns. And for me, it's getting the kids back in class, but we did see how quickly people could shift, even those people that we know are in impossible circumstances, really done remarkable things. So I guess I just want to be respectful of everybody's time. It sounds like we have a recommendation from the committee. We're going to support option 5 and monthly early release on Wednesdays. I was wondering, Diane, if there's a way to get that graphic. I do want to thank everybody. I mean, it's troublesome that you have heard some of my feedback as not necessarily being supportive of you. I value your work and your perspective and your expertise, and just because I disagree with you doesn't mean that I don't see all of that. And I know that the community feels the same way. I mean, we hear it every day that there's remarkable things being done in our schools. So thank you for that and all of your hard work. One of the things I was going to suggest is if there's a way that we can present with our recommendation, the original proposal of administration, so that the board can hear, like, yes, the committee does have a recommendation, but this is what the administration put together as its proposal initially. And then I think that might be a nice balance to have the conversation and not get too far astray, but also sort of so that they can see everything. Is that something you're able to do, Diane?
Yeah, so just to make sure that I understand you correctly, so what you're asking for is a mock-up of the school calendar with the administrator proposal and a mock-up of the school calendar with proposal 5 and a once a month early release.
When you say that, that sounds like a ton of work. I was just trying to think of if you could use the slide you already have. I mean, if that's too much, don't. But
so we can use that slide, but I'm assuming that you will want at least one calendar draft for the board.
Yeah, I think so.
Yep, but we can certainly build in information from the slides in terms of, so that slide is presented at the meeting as well.
And that really comes from a place of wanting the board to know that this is the administration's original proposal and what they recommended, and that this is sort of a result of everybody hearing everybody's concerns and coming to a middle ground and coming forth with the recommendation. But I would like to honor that initial recommendation.
For clarification, does that include the every Wednesday time as well, or not?
I think it could. Yeah, I think that makes sense if that's what we're doing.
Yep, I can do that.
I don't understand Monique's question. Sorry. I just want to make sure we all agree, we're all actually agreeing on the same thing.
Well, that's why I asked. I was not clear. What I heard Alisha say was putting together 2 calendars with an administrator proposal, and it was also the administrator's it was the K-12 Leadership Council proposal for a weekly, if not bi-weekly, early release. And it will be a change in terms of, and the data clearly indicates that it would be early release, not late start. So I just wondered if that was is going to be included in what Diana's putting together.
So what I took away from the conversation, and that's probably important because that's how the work's going to get done, is that I will do the draft calendar like you usually see it with the boards, with the decision made here tonight by the board, and then I will include a slide or 2 that was the leadership team's proposal, their original proposal, without overlaying it onto an actual calendar. Thank you, Alisha.
I mean, do what you want, but I wasn't trying to add to your work. I just wanted to try to to say, like, this is where we started. This was the recommendation, and we had some back and forth, and this is where the committee wound up. But I do think, like I said, I'm not trying to change the opinion of everybody on the board based on the committee work. We're charged with a recommendation, but I think it's fair for the full board to hear your proposal, and they're welcome to feel differently. So
I think it definitely validates the ask, right?
Yeah.
It acknowledges what the leadership council advocated for, and as we've said before, we understand that there are lots of constraints in the current times.
Is it possible to get the I don't know if other committee people do their own, but I can't work. I don't know how to do it. So is it possible to get the data, whatever that we saw in our email, to get that into the slide too, that
Survey
shows
data? Sure.
Yeah, the survey data.
Yep.
I think that might be helpful for everybody to see too. Thank you.
Welcome.
We didn't do any planning for our next meeting, which was on the agenda, but we did get through this. That was a big.
JLCB.
That's all set, though. We did that last
so
time.
it's ready for second reading.
Yeah, I was just trying to
I
find.
just wanted to make absolutely sure. Perfect. Okay, because
I just need to find where it is and get the finalized draft in. But yes.
Perfect.
Monique, are you waving by, or do you have a question?
It was a wave goodbye. I'm not sure we need to be here as you folks finish up your business. Thank
No,
you.
yes, thank you.
Participate. Much appreciated.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. All right, do we have a next meeting date? Do we have is this committee a committee with a standing meeting time?
It is.
Okay.
Let's see.
Oh yeah, the 11th.
The second Tuesday, right?
May 11th from 4 to 5:30.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Does anybody have anything? I know it's late. That they want prioritized at the next meeting, or do you want to just for me to put something on there and we'll plug away?
Yeah. Even if you want to send some recommendations in terms of like
Okay.
go to next, then we can
Chime in.
to model policies or do some preparation work.
Oh, that's a good idea. Okay. Awesome.